Hello, class of International Economics. Welcome to our final lecture for this semester. Um, Today, we will have a brief summary of the overall class, along with some discussions on the topics of international trades, especially the contemporary topics. And plus, I will give out some guidelines for the final exam that is scheduled for next week so that you can get some sense of what the exam will look like. All right, so this will be our final class for this semester. And I would like to start with a review of the guideline for the final exam, and I would like to give you some examples of the exam. So again, for those who missed last class, I would like to make a review, repeat the guideline again. So the exam date is scheduled for July 19th from 9:30 to 10:30. And it will cover lecture 1 to 14, including today's class. And there will be 40 multiple choice questions on the key concepts, and each will be 1% of your final grade, as the final exam counts for 40% of your final grade. And again, because I cannot check whether you are looking at the lecture slides or doing some Googlings, I will allow you to look at the lecture slides. Yeah. And on the Google Forms, there will be the questions as we are doing our attendance checks. And I guess the last quiz, I think we had it like 6 weeks ago. It will be the same format. So there will be four options, and you will have 40 questions, and then you can just check A, B, or C, or D. The link for the Google Forms will be available on the Manaba announcement page on the exam date at 9:30 a.m. So I highly encourage you guys to log in beforehand and do some refresh at 9:30 so that you can take the exam right after I make the announcement. And plus, I will allow you to submit the answers multiple times for those who want to double check your submission. So if you're worried whether your answers have not been submitted correctly, you can do it multiple times. I will only look at the last submission, okay? So I highly encourage you guys to keep track of the answers. You could probably open up a notepad or Word so that you can keep track of the answers like A, C, D, B, A. And then if you would like to make a resubmission, you can do it, okay? And also, I encourage you guys to keep track of your own answers because I will upload the answer on the Manaba website at 10:30 a.m. After the exam time so that you can check your answers right after the exam. Okay, and this will mean that any submission after 10:30 will not be accepted. So I hope you don't wait until the last minute. I was trying to be a little bit generous for the late submissions of the briefs, but because I will upload the answer sheet on the Manaba at 10:30, that means any submission after 10:30 could be considered as referring to those answers. So yeah, please make sure that you submit the your answer sheets before 10:30. And as I told you earlier, you can make multiple submissions. So yeah, I hope you don't ask for the possibilities of late submissions. Okay, and I would like to give you some examples for the final exam. So those contents could be a little bit different from the what we have learned. They could be related. They do not necessarily have to be related, but these are some kind of styles or formats that I would like to use. You can also look at our quizzes again if you like to, because I think similar types of questions will be on our final exam. So the first example is asking for how the example was used to describe a terminology. So, for example, if we have used the example of Big Mac price for the example of, well, the answer here is A, purchasing power parity. So you could know that, okay, Big Mac is one part of it, and then you can easily choose the answer. And number two, the value of the global exports for the past century has been increasing, decreasing, staying the same? No. So this question actually comes from our lecture one, and I have showed you a graph where the trend of the value of the global exports has been increasing for the past century, or a little bit more than the past century. So here the answer will be A, and the evidence could be found in our first lecture. And the third example, this is also from our first lecture, which is on the definition of the international economics. So according to the Encyclopedia of Social Measurement, the international economics mainly deals with, so I have provided the exact wording from there. And the answer here is C, issues arising from economic interaction among sovereign nations. Well, there can be some questions that might not use the exact wordings. In this case, I have used the exact definition, the same definition, but I might paraphrase some because some of you might just search for the word on the PowerPoint slides and answer those without understanding. So in order to test your understanding a little bit more, I might do some paraphrasing. And here, the question asks whether what kind of thing does international economics mainly deal with? And A, B, and D, they are all parts of the international economics, all some parts, but they are too specific to be the answer. And C is the best option for the question because it asks what does it mainly deal with. So for example, A, North-South trades and economic development. Of course, international economics is interested in those, but it also deals with South-South trades and their relationship with the economic development too. Also, B, the trade disputes is also one part of the international economics, but it is not their main interest. It's like not the biggest topic or the best definition to define the international economics. And so is D. Right. So I hope you could read the questions very carefully. I will try to make the questions and the answer options very clearly, and so that because, well, considering that we are not able to have interactions during the exam period, I will try my best to make the questions very clear. Yes, yeah, it could have been better if we could, come together to a lecture hall so that you could ask some questions if there are any need for clarification. But because we cannot do that, I will try to provide as clear uh, explanations to each questions and answers. Okay, so that was a brief overview. But if you still have any question regarding the final exam, please ask me by email. And here is a brief summary of the final chapter of our textbook, our main textbook, which is this one. So it is chapter 7 in our textbook. So I would like to deal with some of the topics. Actually, this book mentions 4 topics that are related to the contemporary discussions of the international trade. But I have skipped the part where it discusses about the trade in uh, ideas or trade in knowledge, because I think we have already talked about the intellectual property rights or some concepts of absorptive capacity, as we have gone through the example of the product space by Hidalgo et al. All right, so the first topic is the trade in energy, trade in energy. So these days, well, every country needs energy, but they all have different types of energy productions. And some countries are more dependent on, for example, crude oil. Some are more dependent on natural gases, nuclear energies, or renewable energies too these days. So I would like to show you some graphs that are related to the trends of trade and energy these days. So the first one, this graph shows the U.S. trade trends over the last 20 years. So in early 2000s, the U.S. showed very minimal exports in energy. But from 2005 and from 2010, the export volume has increased, especially among the petroleum products. On the other hand, most of the imports came from the crude oil. Well, this is quite obvious because U.S. is very dependent on the imports of the crude oil for its energy generations. And it has peaked until 2007 and 8, but it decreased. And well, there are some fluctuations over the years. Well, if you look at the composition of selected U.S. energy imports by the country of origin, you can see that the U.S. energy imports are highly dependent on Canada. They have a close relationship with Canada, and over lots of all kinds of like crude oil, natural gases, or even the electricity imports. And from the crude oils, you can see that the U.S. also has diverse trade partners, including Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Mexico, Iraq, Colombia, which are all exporters, major exporters of the crude oil. Well, it is notable that U.S. is highly dependent on the crude oil imports from the Latin American or the American countries because of the the transportation costs are cheaper. Because if it comes from the Middle East, it has to travel far. So considering even in the energy sector, even in the trade in energy, the geography matters. And the exports, the U.S. energy exports, they are also closely linked with the geographic factors because their biggest export partners are Mexico and Canada, which are the two closest countries to the U.S. From geographical perspective, and also Brazil. And it also has lots of interactions with China, Japan, and Korea. Um, and well, yeah, it is quite notable that these East Asian countries are also big export partners of the US. Well, if you look at the trends over the world, you can see there are some gray countries, some blue countries, right? The gray countries, they are net energy exporting regions, and the blue countries are net energy importing regions. So, for example, the European countries and the East Asian countries, um, they have less resources for the energy generations than what they have to consume. So, for example, in the East Asian countries, China, Japan, and South Korea, they all have relatively fewer energy resources, including the like petroleum. But they are industrialized countries, and they depend highly on the manufacturing sectors, which require lots of energy consumptions. So they are usually the importing regions, and which is similarly applied to the Europe. And you can see that, well, obviously the Middle East countries, they have high, high rates of exports in the oil, and which is also the same in the Latin American countries. And yeah, for Russia, well, they have some natural gases, so we can see that they export some natural gases along with the petroleum. Well, and it is notable that China again is a big factor in the energy trading sector too. I think I am mentioning China in every lecture that we are talking about, but um, in the topic, under the topic of energy too, China is one of the biggest consumer in the global energy market. And well, there it is not only the traditional energy, but also in the renewable energy sectors. So China is showing the highest percentage of growth estimated for the renewable energy. And actually, China is the biggest producer of the solar panels, and I believe that to not sure, but I think it took more than 50% of the total world's production of the the solar panels. And because of this, well, there are some countries they are trying to limit the Chinese influence on the renewable energy sectors. So they have put some of the anti-dumping duties. So if you see the complainant countries, you can see that the US or the EU, they are they have chosen some products. For example, the modules from China for the photovoltaic, the PV cells, and well, it is also a big trade dispute issue between the US or EU and China because they are trying to get the leadership in the renewable energy market. And because China has the production capability, whereas the US or EU, namely Germany, they have the technological capability. They are trying to dominate the market, but well, not exactly one country is yet dominating the market. So, but still, China has a big advantage in its prices. So, lots of solar panels installed in Japan or South Korea, they are actually from China. So in many countries, even though they would like to expand the production of renewable energy, they have to depend highly on mostly Chinese products or sometimes the US products too. So I believe that in the future, because well, the renewable energy is a hot topic these days, and this trend will continue for, I guess, a few more years in the future. There could be some additional trade disputes between the countries that are aiming to develop their renewable energy sectors. And the next topic is the trade and services. So, well, in the traditional trade theories, they mostly talk about the trades and manufacturing. So if you recall back from the examples of like Ricardian model, Texture Alden model, they all use the examples of like textiles or like wine, which are the traditional goods, the actual physical goods. But in fact, the importance of services is growing, and most of the GDP, around like more than two-thirds of the GDP, are are from service sectors in the developed countries, and its importance is also getting larger in the developing countries too. And this is also the same in the international trade sectors. So if you look at the importance of the, for example, service over share of service over trading goods, which is the uh, line above the charts, it is growing continuously for the past decades. And you can see that still the manufacturing volume is larger than the volume of trade and services, but the share is increasing. So these days it is around 25 to 30% in the total trade. So you can see that, the share is increasing as our societies become more digitalized, more servicified. We can expect that the importance of the services, even in the international trade, will get larger. If you look at the world trade and services, there are some countries that are taking big portions of the world exports and imports. But usually, it is the traditional EU or the NAFTA, which also have the big economic volumes. But also, it is notable to see that China and plus, surprisingly, Singapore, which is far smaller in the country size, especially in the populations, is takes a very high volume of 4%, even with a very small um, number of populations. I believe that this is because its economic structure or the industrial structure is highly dependent on the service industries already. And it is actually the hub of the, Singapore is the hub of the international financial trade. So that could be one reason. And as we have mentioned, the services are the getting more and more important these days. And if you look at the chart on the right side, the red lines indicate the share of services within the total trade of goods and services in 2010. And the blue lines are for 2018. So you can see that in most of the countries, the share has risen, especially in Singapore or EU or India or US, which already had the high share of the services. They have increased. And you can see that in some countries there are not too many changes or even decreasing. For example, South Korea or Hong Kong, they also showed some decreasing share of services. And these countries are actually quite dependent on their key manufacturing sectors. For example, electronics for both countries, I guess. So I guess that's one of the reasons why their share hasn't been changing too much over the past decade. But still, the service sectors, they contribute a lot to the total GDP and plus the employment. So the importance of the trade and services will get um, a bit larger. So I hope you can keep an eye on even the service sectors. So when you hear the topics of international trades, that is not only the trades through the cargoes, through planes, shipments. Um, that's not only the international trade. These days, the trades and services are increasing. So imagine the AS after service centers in India for several global economies. Um, the Indian service industry is the international service trades is increasing in India a lot because um, thanks to the language advantage because the Indian population has more advantage in their English capabilities, so they can easily well utilize to for example, the service centers, the global service centers that need someone who can speak English fluently. And yeah, and plus they have lots of populations receiving the engineering educations. So the tech companies they also favor the Indian subsidiaries or the Indian companies that can provide the services to their own um, the head companies. Okay, and if we look closely at the services exports from both developed and developing countries, we can see that both parts the volume has grown um, through the past history. And although the growth in the merchandise trade was significantly weaker, uh, a similar pattern was evident for the developed economies and developing countries. Whereas the exports from the transition economies, they fell by 5.5%. So if you see the graph on the right side, they show you a trend of the merchandise and service exports from 1995 to 2014. And for the 20 years, you can see that overall the trends are going up. But what is notable here is the uh, services in the developing countries. And if you look at there, you can see that the light red parts, they are increasing over the years continuously, right? So you can see that the services, they are not only from the developed countries, but the importance has been rising in the developing countries too. And in which categories did they rise in the least developed countries? Well, we can see that most of the growth of service exports they came from the personal, cultural, or recreational services. Or interestingly, they came also from the intellectual property charges too. Or transport and travel, I guess they are quite related with the tourism businesses. And the construction has decreased. And I guess it is the only notable sector that has experienced a decrease in the growth rate over the 10 years. Yeah, so because we have talked about the topic of the developing countries and the developed countries, we should also take a look at the trade in the developing world. And I think I have mentioned this earlier, that the trade between the developing countries is called the South-South um, trades, because most times the developing countries are located in the southern hemisphere of the earth. Um, and in the past, we have usually experienced lots of trades occurring between the northern country and the southern country. So Well, if you recall from the past cases of, for example, England with India, England exported the machineries and imported cotton from India. So it was a, um, well, well, as our textbook mentions, the developed countries or the industrialized countries, they would export higher value added, the industrialized manufactured goods to the developing countries, and the developing countries will export lower value added, the more primary goods or the resources to the developed or industrialized countries. So that was what we have learned as international trade in the past long years ago. But these days, the South-South trades are getting more important, especially in their volumes. So if you look at the chart on the right side, the brown, the burgundy or brown line that shows the trades between the developing countries, which is the South-South trade. And you can see that it has been rising significantly. And actually, was the this showed the most increase over the last years from 2001 to 2010. Um, and whereas the north trade hasn't been increasing that much, even compared with the north south trades, you can see that the south south trade, the importance has been rising. And for case of the African countries, if you look at the share of the Africa's total trade with the selected partners, you can see that some lines are decreasing and some lines are increasing, right? And well, let's look at the brown line at the top, which is the trades with EU. So we can see that in the past, African countries, they were highly dependent on the trades with the EU countries. And that could be partly because um, many of those countries, they speak the languages, the European languages too. And their infrastructures or their administrative systems, institutions, um, they are quite, in many parts, they are similar with some European countries because of the historical reasons. So that could be one reason for why the trade, the dependency with the EU was very high in the past, but it has been decreasing. Then what has been increasing? The first one is the brown dotted lines, which shows the all developing countries. So the dependence on the South trades has been increasing in the African countries, and especially if you look at the dark blue line, the trade with non-African developing countries, that has been rising too. And well, again, I believe that China took a big role in the increasing in the trade volumes with the African countries because China has been putting lots of efforts to get a closer relationship with the African countries in both economic reasons and political reasons. Um, they have more socio-economic influences in the African countries these days. Well, so as we have seen there, the pattern or the trend of South-South trade of the total trade has been rising. So if you look at the graph on the left side, in 1980, the South-South trade share to only 15%, around 15% of the total trade. But these days, after 2015, it takes more than 40%, and so around half. And considering the economic sizes, it is a big increase. And you can see that the trade patterns, so like for example, the trade between industrialized country and less industrialized countries, that might not be the textbook answer to the economic situations these days we are having because the South-South trade is expanding. And you can see that these patterns are clearly shown in every region, including the North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and the Asian countries. Uh, the the share of the South-South trade has been increasing um, similarly in all of the regions with all of the southern regions. Well, as I've mentioned earlier, many of these factors come from the rise of China. Well, because the Africa-China trade, well, if you see there, the volume is um, increasing sharply over like 10 years. So the trade volumes, they are increasing by like more than 10% each year. And what does China import from Africa? They usually import the raw materials, the natural resources, including the mineral products or the metals. Whereas the Chinese exports to Africa, they are mostly machineries or like transportations. And well, if you go to some of the developing countries, you can see that lots of their railroads or highways or the ports, they are constructed by the Chinese companies. And you can, of course, expect lots of their machineries in their factories. They come from China. Well, of course, there are lots of political reasons, but also from the economic reasons, um, because African countries, they have lots of natural resources. China can get achieve security in the natural resource imports. As we have mentioned earlier, high dependence on the natural resources is risky because there can be lots of changes in their prices. And as an exporter or as an importer, you would not want to experience high volatility in the prices of the natural resources. So if you have a close relationship, you can make long-term contracts with the partner countries, and then you can secure those natural resources more easily from those partner countries. And that's why we are having more and more active trades between China and Africa. So Chinese economy, they need more natural resources. The African countries, they need more physical capitals or infrastructures, and China can provide them. Okay, so they are the last new things from our lectures from this semester. So I hope you can take some time to review the key concepts. I have summarized. I don't know whether you have already recognized them, but in our syllabus, I always give you the keywords for each subject, each topic in each class. So, for example, like class number 2, when we were talking about the Ricardia model, we were talking about the labor productivity leading to the comparative advantage of each country. And when we were talking about the HO model, we talked about that each countries have different relative prices, and because of those differences in the factors of production, each country will eventually have the different comparative advantages in different sectors. And we have also talked about some additional theorems, including the Stolper-Samuelson theorems. So as such, you should be able to distinguish at least, so this is like the minimum things that you should memorize. And if you do not memorize them, you might take some more time to look up the relevant materials in the lecture slides. So as you are studying beforehand, I hope you can, well, review those concepts, key concepts, as you are watching the videos. Yeah, so if you haven't watched or if you have skipped some of the video clips, I highly encourage you guys to review them again and yeah, to get ready. And if anything is unclear for you, or if you need any additional explanation on any of the concept, please, please feel free to send me an email. Okay. All right, and lastly, some study tips for my final exam. Again, you should understand the key concepts from each lecture, and I recommend you to make your own cheat sheet. In my college years, I actually had some exams that allowed a cheat sheet, even though we had to be present in the lecture halls. We could bring some cheat sheet. And that was a really good way to actually review the key concepts. So I think it will be a good strategy to make your own cheat sheet for this class too, because we have dealt with quite a number of new concepts. And I hope you also look at the examples and understand why they were mentioned, because some questions may ask on the examples, which are discussed during our lecture, but they will necessarily uh, may not be on the lecture slides. So if you could go over the examples as you are making the cheat sheet, I think that will be a good strategy for you too. Okay, so that's the end of this semester. Thank you very much for your well participation. And well, it's a little bit sad that we could not meet on in our lecture halls, but I hope my classes gave you some well insights on the topic of the international trade. Actually, the topic of international economics is very fun subject. Well, the lectures, I guess, could have been a little bit boring, but I hope you keep your interest in the topic of the international trade. And if you would like to have any kind of further discussion on the topic or the research, I'll be more than willing to have some conversation or discussion with you in the future too, even though the semester has ended. All right, again, so thank you very much for this semester and wish you a good luck for the final exam. And yeah, feel free to contact me anytime. All right, yeah, so thank you very much. Bye bye.